In addition to all of her royal duties, Queen Consort Camilla has had to deal with some difficult family losses over the last several months.
All different terms have been used to describe her. The other woman, a home wrecker, someone who destroyed a modern fairy tale, someone who lived in Princess Diana's shadow.
From the moment she quietly stepped into Prince Charles's life, Camilla Parker Bowles became a figure of fascination and controversy. At first, she was invisible, a background presence, a name whispered behind palace doors. But soon the cameras found her, and the whispers turned into headlines. What began as quiet affection became one of the most public scandals in royal history. Despite the storms of criticism and judgment, she stayed close, moving carefully, step by step, into the heart of the royal family. And though she eventually achieved what many thought impossible, becoming queen consort beside Charles,
his wife, now his queen consort, Camilla. Their life in the public eye, a journey of decades, and there was some doubt along the way about what her new title would be. But of course, it was among Queen Elizabeth's final wishes that Camilla be called queen consort.
the shadow of Diana never left her. Every public appearance carried that invisible comparison. Every smile, every wave, every headline drew her back into that endless debate. Could the woman once seen as the villain ever truly be accepted as queen? The scandal that never ended. Her story was never one of smooth paths or simple acceptance. What could have been a story of love instead became one of scandal, whispers, and public outrage. She wasn't simply Charles's partner. To many, she was the other woman. Even after their marriage, public acceptance felt impossible. The coronation that was supposed to seal her position only reminded the world of what came before. For millions, the ghost of Diana hovered above every celebration, every royal event, every mention of Camilla's name. Each public outing was dissected by tabloids. Each photo was compared. The crown gave her a title.
Big changes coming for Queen Consort Camilla. According to The Sun, close sources say that Camilla is set to drop the consort part of her title and just be referred to as Queen. This will likely take place after King Charles's coronation.
But it didn't erase the years of resentment or the memories people refused to let go of. Camilla carried both, the crown and the burden of being the woman the public had decided to dislike. Seeking peace, she retreated from the noise. Her countryside estate, Raymill House in Wiltshire, became her escape. Unlike the grand palaces associated with royalty, Raymill represented privacy, comfort, and control, her own world away from the institution. There, she was simply Camilla, not the queen. But to critics, Raymill symbolized something else. Secrecy. To them, it was a quiet fortress, a place where she operated beyond the eyes of the monarchy and the media. Reports emerged of private dinners, quiet visits from political figures, and subtle but significant meetings. Supporters dismissed them as harmless gatherings. Critics called them strategic. Every detail was questioned: who she met, what was discussed, and why. Meanwhile, Catherine's public warmth and open presence made Camilla's privacy seem distant and guarded. The contrast between the two women only deepened the divide. While Catherine was seen at hospitals, schools, and public events, charming crowds with her effortless grace, Camilla seemed to move in the background, preferring quiet corridors and private rooms. What some saw as dignity, others interpreted as detachment. The comparisons became a quiet competition, and over time, one side was clearly winning in public perception. Whispers inside the palace. Public approval, once a soft measure of popularity, began shaping the monarchy itself. By the mid-2020s, social media and surveys made it impossible to ignore. Catherine's approval ratings soared, often above 70 or 80%. While Camilla's hovered near 30. These weren't just numbers. They were reflections of loyalty, emotion, and influence. Within the palace, these figures didn't go unnoticed. Advisors quietly began worrying. Some argued that Camilla's image was too fragile to withstand another public crisis. Others believed her growing confidence and her subtle attempts at influence were crossing invisible lines. What began as whispers among staff turned into quiet caution among senior royals. Raymill House, once her refuge, became part of the conversation. Reports hinted at Camilla hosting private discussions there, ones not documented in official schedules. The tone inside Buckingham Palace shifted. Some courtiers loyal to the king started receiving direct instructions from her instead, bypassing established channels. It wasn't open defiance, but it hinted at a new power dynamic taking root, one the monarchy wasn't built for. Princess Anne, known for her discipline and loyalty to royal tradition, noticed.
Anne, Princess Royal, has been known to some as her royal rudeness, but she's also been called the monarchy's trustiest anchor over the years. Here's how King Charles's only sister has made herself invaluable and unforgettable.
Prince William, with his deep sense of responsibility and protectiveness over his father's legacy, grew cautious. Catherine, aware of her rising role, remained publicly silent but strategically distant. Each played their part quietly, but the unspoken tension was growing. Inside palace walls, Camilla's influence was being quietly recorded, not in official reports, but in the watchful eyes of those around her. Notes were taken, patterns were noticed, and soon, the fragments of observation formed a bigger picture. A subtle but undeniable question was emerging. How much power did the queen consort truly hold?
The queen consort is essentially the same in title as a traditional queen, albeit resulting in a slightly different social status, as the queen consort lacks the sovereign right of power that traditionally gets passed down with the throne.
The monarchy's survival depended not just on duty but on unity, and that unity was beginning to fracture. Camilla's growing assertiveness was no longer dismissed as confidence. It was being seen as something more, perhaps even ambition. For a family that had weathered so many storms, another internal conflict could be catastrophic. As tensions grew, the private meetings continued. Some staff found themselves torn between two centers of power, one from the king, the other from his consort. It wasn't open rebellion, but it was enough to cause unease. The once clear hierarchy of palace operations began to blur. In quiet moments, senior staff whispered that the palace now served two monarchs, one by title, another by will. The queen consort's image outside the palace wasn't helping. Each time she withdrew to Raymill, the tabloids speculated. Was she avoiding her royal duties, or building her own circle away from oversight? For the public, these were just rumors. For the royals, they were warning signs. Princess Anne was the first to act. Known for her blunt honesty, she voiced her concern directly to Charles. Her message was simple: the monarchy survives on stability, and anything that jeopardizes that stability must be addressed. Prince William followed, more measured but equally firm. His growing distance from his father didn't go unnoticed, and behind closed doors, tension between the next heir and the reigning monarch began to surface. Charles, torn between his love for Camilla and his duty as king, faced an impossible choice. He had defended her for decades, against the world, against critics, and even against family. But this time, it wasn't about love. It was about the future of the crown. For weeks, the palace operated under quiet tension. Public appearances were polished and pleasant, but behind the smiles, silence grew heavier. The once calm corridors buzzed with speculation. Long-serving aides avoided questions. Staff loyal to Camilla seemed unusually cautious. Every action, every meeting, was recorded in someone's memory. Camilla continued her duties as usual: formal visits, charity events, polite smiles. But her expressions were often studied, her gestures analyzed. The press noticed her absences, so did the family. Small cracks in routine hinted at something larger beneath the surface. Those closest to her said she had become more withdrawn. She avoided unnecessary discussions, relying on her small, trusted circle. Raymill once again became her escape, and it was there, far from royal ears, that she found comfort in solitude. But even in retreat, Speculation followed. Each quiet visit raised new questions. Was she preparing to step back or step ahead? By then, even the king was under growing pressure. His approval ratings had begun to mirror hers. Senior courtiers urged him to protect the monarchy's image. Others warned that ignoring internal tension could lead to a repeat of past scandals, the kind that had haunted his reign since before it began. Behind closed doors, decisions were being made. Private meetings between Charles, William, and Anne stretched late into the night. Each conversation carried weight. Each pause revealed hesitation. The unspoken truth was clear. Something had to change, and soon. The story that began as a quiet romance had become a defining chapter in royal history. Camilla Parker Bowles, once a private woman caught in a public storm, now stood at the center of a monarchy questioning its future. Her crown glittered under the cameras, but its foundation was fragile, and within those walls of power, where loyalty and legacy collide, the question lingered. How much longer could the balance hold? The reckoning within. The calm didn't last long. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was thick with quiet suspicion. Every glance, every whisper carried weight. The tension between Camilla and other senior royals was no longer hidden. It was felt by everyone who worked behind the scenes. What once seemed like subtle discomfort had grown into something more visible, a silent standoff that no one dared to address openly. Charles, who had always been protective of Camilla, tried to keep peace. But the weight of the crown left him torn. He had fought for years to legitimize their relationship, to prove that love could endure public judgment. Yet now, as king, he faced a new dilemma. The same woman he defended was becoming a source of division within his own family. Camilla, on the other hand, appeared unbothered in public. She continued her duties with calm confidence, smiling at events, maintaining her composure, and playing her role as queen consort.
Known as the other woman, Camilla is now the queen. Kind of. The new king's darling wife has become the queen consort.
I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion to duty.
But behind closed doors, those close to her described her as frustrated and wary. She felt misunderstood, a woman who had spent decades fighting for a place that still didn't feel truly hers. Her private circle grew smaller. The same independence that once made her resilient now isolated her. Those who had supported her began to step back, afraid of being drawn into internal politics. Even Charles's advisors noticed the distance forming between the couple. He was busy with royal obligations. She spent more time at Raymill. The balance that once held their relationship together started to falter. The tensions spilled into daily routines. Palace aides began choosing sides quietly, some aligned with the king, others with the queen consort. Simple scheduling tasks turned into subtle power struggles. Who sat next to whom at dinner? Who was briefed first? Even minor issues hinted at deeper divisions. For a family built on unity, these cracks were dangerous. The palace knew that once rumors escaped, they couldn't be controlled. And yet, silence only made the whispers grow louder. The turning point. It wasn't one single event that caused everything to shift. It was a buildup of moments that finally became too heavy to ignore. One day, reports surfaced in the media about Camilla's absence from an important royal engagement. The official reason was health and rest, but insiders suggested otherwise. Some said she refused to attend due to disagreements over scheduling. Others claimed she felt sidelined by newer members of the royal family. The public, already divided, began speculating again. Online debates reignited old wounds. Was she stepping back voluntarily or being quietly pushed out of the spotlight? The palace tried to control the story, but the narrative had already escaped. Headlines compared her retreat to Diana's final years, stirring emotions that the family had worked decades to calm. Supporters defended her privacy, while critics painted her as distant and disengaged. The old label, the unwanted queen,
Parker Bowles, the other woman, emerged. Press at the time running wild with the theory she'd meddled in the royal relationship.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
began to surface again in online discussions. Inside Buckingham Palace, senior advisors convened emergency meetings. The monarchy's image was slipping, and the king's team knew something had to change before it damaged public trust. Discussions turned to redefining Camilla's role, not to remove her, but to reposition her as less visible, focusing on private charity work rather than frontline royal duties. Charles was conflicted. On one hand, he wanted to protect his wife from more public hostility. On the other, he understood that her continued presence at the forefront of royal life might further divide the family and the nation. After days of quiet meetings, a decision began to take shape, one that would allow Camilla to retreat gracefully without appearing to lose her standing. She would reduce her official appearances, citing health and personal focus. Her engagements would become more selective, her time divided between royal duties and private life at Raymill. It was a quiet solution, a way to ease tension without inviting scandal. But within the palace, everyone knew what it truly meant. For years, she had fought to be seen as an equal partner beside the king. Now, that spotlight was dimming, slowly but deliberately. Still, there was no open conflict, no official announcement of withdrawal. Instead, the monarchy adjusted quietly, shifting focus toward William and Catherine, the couple the public already viewed as the future. Their popularity rose with every new project, every public appearance, every smile that seemed genuine and effortless. Camilla watched from a distance. She knew this shift was inevitable. The public had chosen their symbols of hope, and she was no longer one of them. The quiet aftermath. In the months that followed, a strange calm settled over the royal family. The noise, the headlines, the fiery debates, they all began to fade. Camilla's absence from major royal events was no longer shocking. It became the new normal. Palace announcements were brief, respectful, and repetitive, always mentioning her continuing work in private, a phrase that soon became familiar to the public. Gradually, attention drifted elsewhere. The British press, forever hungry for a new story, turned its gaze toward the next generation. William and Catherine stepped into the light with grace, their growing family symbolizing hope for the monarchy's future. Their warmth, their accessibility, and their charm captured the hearts of a public that longed for stability. And in that shift, Camilla quietly disappeared from the center stage she had once fought so hard to reach. Behind closed doors, however, her life took on a different rhythm. Raymill House, once the subject of endless speculation, became her true refuge. The quiet countryside home that had once been questioned for its secrecy now felt like a safe haven, a place untouched by royal protocol or public scrutiny. Here, Camilla was simply herself again. Her mornings were slow, filled with tea, books, and long walks through the gardens she had personally nurtured over the years. She spent hours tending to roses, her favorite flowers, perhaps because they embodied everything her life had come to represent: beauty and fragility, strength hidden behind thorns. Friends who visited her described a softer woman, one far removed from the tension of court life. They said she laughed more often, spoke more openly, and carried a peace that had long been missing from her public image. Charles, meanwhile, continued with the weight of his duties. As king, every day brought new ceremonies, meetings, and expectations. Yet despite the growing distance between their public lives, their bond remained quietly intact. They shared letters, phone calls, and occasional visits. When together, they avoided the topic of public perception. There was no need. Both knew what it had cost them to reach where they were. Both knew how hard it had been to hold on. Through all the criticism, Camilla had never asked for sympathy. She had simply wanted space, to exist beyond the headlines, beyond the comparisons, to a woman she could never replace. Now, in this quieter chapter, she finally had that. Over time, even public opinion began to shift. Without the glare of constant coverage, people began to see her in a different light. Not as the rival to Diana, not as the symbol of scandal, but as a woman who had endured decades of judgment, who had made mistakes yet carried them with grace, who had stood beside a man she loved even when the world told her not to. Her silence spoke louder than any interview could have. Her withdrawal wasn't an escape, it was strength. By choosing distance, she had disarmed criticism. By choosing peace, she had won something far rarer than approval. She had found dignity. Meanwhile, William and Catherine became the heart of the monarchy's public face. Their work, their warmth, their compassion continued to rebuild faith in the royal family. The couple's authenticity drew people closer, while their devotion to family life reflected a modern kind of royalty, one built on empathy rather than tradition alone. In their light, the institution found renewal. Yet, in quiet moments, traces of Camilla's influence still lingered. Certain traditions she had modernized remained in place. The charities she championed continued to grow. Even the tone of the monarchy, softer, more human, carried her imprint. It was as if, even from a distance, she was still shaping the crown she had once worn, not with authority, but with the memory of her resilience. The crown that had once felt so heavy upon her head no longer defined her. The expectations had faded, the noise had quieted, and for the first time in decades, she could breathe without the weight of judgment pressing against her. Camilla may never win the complete affection of the public, but perhaps that was never her goal. Her journey was never about being adored. It was about surviving. It was about standing tall through decades of scrutiny, holding her ground even when the world wanted her gone. When history looks back at Camila Parker Bowles, the woman who stepped into the most controversial love story of her time, became queen, and then quietly stepped back, her legacy won't be written in tabloids or approval polls. It will be written in endurance. Because in the end, her story wasn't a tale of glory or downfall. It was a story of humanity, imperfect, messy, but deeply real. And maybe that's why she remains unforgettable. So, as the cameras move on and new stories take their place, Camilla's chapter in royal history remains one of quiet survival. Her path was never smooth, and her crown was never light. But through scandal, heartbreak, and endless judgment, she remained standing. She learned that sometimes power doesn't come from position. It comes from persistence. It comes from choosing to stay true to yourself, even when the world refuses to understand you. Perhaps that's what makes her story so unique. She never asked to be loved by everyone. She only wanted to be accepted as herself, flaws and all. And in her own way, she achieved that. The woman once called the other woman became queen, and when the noise grew too loud, she quietly stepped back, not defeated, but at peace. Because sometimes the quietest endings speak the loudest truths. Camilla's story isn't just about the fall of a queen. It's about the strength it takes to live through the storm and still find your calm. And maybe that's the real crown she's carried all along,